Red warning lights flooded the asteroid's surface as Raxor's claws scraped against the rocky ground, sending small pebbles skittering into the void. His strike team of 8 Mr. warriors spread out behind him, their scaled bodies glinting under the emergency beacons like living metal in the darkness of space. "Impossible," Raxor growled, his reptilian eyes narrowing at the sight of metal hatches and sensor arrays emerging from what should have been bare rock. Anger bubbled in his throat. This was supposed to be an easy mission. The scouts reported this rock was empty. Those useless worms. The first shots came without warning. A hidden turret burst from the ground with a mechanical whir, its railgun spitting hypervelocity rounds that turned one of his warriors into purple mist. The warrior didn't even have time to scream. "Take cover!" Raxor dove behind a boulder, feeling the heat of near misses on his scales. "Return fire! Spread out!" Inside the command bunker, Captain Dmitry Novak watched the alien formation scatter across his monitors, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Release the drones," he ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos unfolding above. "Pattern Delta 7, let's give our guests a proper welcome." A swarm of small machines zipped from concealed launch tubes, weaving between the rocks like angry metal wasps. The Miroth warriors wasted precious ammunition shooting them down, while the real threat, the automated defense grid, locked onto their positions with deadly accuracy. "Sir?" one of Raxor's soldiers called out, panic clear in his usually steady voice. "They're using the asteroid's rotation to—" The warrior's words cut off as a railgun round found its mark, adding another purple cloud to the vacuum. Raxor watched in horror as more hidden weapons platforms emerged from the asteroid's surface, popping up like deadly flowers in spring. These humans weren't the primitive species he'd been told about. Their defenses were clever, coordinated, and deadly effective. Each move they made seemed calculated to force his warriors into killing zones. "Fall back to the ships," Raxor commanded, ducking under another barrage that left scoring marks on his armor. "The humans are too well prepared. This is a death trap." "Should we pursue?" Novak, second in command, asked as they watched the Miroth retreat in disarray across their tactical displays. "No need," Novak replied, tapping commands into his console with practiced ease. "Let them run. Let them tell their leaders what happens when you underestimate humanity. Sometimes the best lesson is surviving to spread the word." As Raxor's fleet limped away, trailing debris and wounded warriors, the battle's aftermath rippled far beyond the asteroid belt. News of the failed assault reached Mars Command within hours, sending a shiver of urgency through Earth's defense network. Admiral Jana Rodriguez stood before the holographic display in her Mars Command Center, her jaw tight as she watched the footage from Outpost 217. The images showed Mr. warriors, their scaled bodies moving with predatory grace, being cut down by concealed defense systems. Their death screams echoed through the command center's speakers, a chilling reminder of the cost of war. "Play it again," she ordered, focusing on the moment when Captain Novak's railguns tore through the invaders' energy shields. Those shields didn't stand a chance against good old-fashioned kinetic weapons. Sometimes the oldest solutions work best. Her aide stepped forward, datapad clutched nervously in his hands. "Ma'am, Novak's report indicates they were caught completely off guard by our defenses. They expected an empty rock. The look on their faces when our guns popped up. Well, if lizards could look surprised, they did." Rodriguez nodded, her dark eyes reflecting the red glow of the emergency indicators. The flashing lights cast eerie shadows across her weathered face. "Get me fleet command. I want rapid response teams dispatched to every outpost in the system. Now, we can't afford to leave any weakness for them to exploit." Millions of kilometers away in a quiet monitoring station, Xelthor's crystalline form trembled as he processed the intercepted transmissions. His sensors had picked up fragments of battle data, enough to confirm his worst fears. The station's lights reflected off his faceted surface, sending rainbow patterns dancing across the walls. "The Miroth have broken the treaty," he whispered to himself, his crystalline structure pulsing with anxiety. They were warned about the Sol system. They were told it was off limits. Those fools will doom us all with their greed. Meanwhile, aboard his command ship, Raxor nursed his wounds in pride as he transmitted his report to the Mirath High Command. Green blood oozed from a gash on his scaled arm where debris had struck him during the retreat. The humans possess unexpected defensive capabilities, he growled into the comm. Their primitive projectile weapons somehow penetrated our most advanced shielding technology. We lost good warriors today to their tricks. The response from his superiors came swiftly and dismissively, their voices dripping with contempt. A minor setback. Prepare a larger force. These mammals simply caught us unaware. They cannot stand against our full might. Do not fail us again, Commander. Back on Mars, Rodriguez watched as her orders rippled across the system. Ships moved into defensive positions, crews scrambled to battle stations, and colonial defense grids hummed to life. The tactical display looked like a disturbed ant nest with vessels rushing to their assigned posts. Send word to every outpost, she commanded. We're at Condition 1. All civilian traffic is to be escorted by military vessels. No exceptions. She paused, studying the tactical display showing human forces spreading across the solar system like a protective web. Her fingers traced the movement patterns on the hologram. They thought they could catch us sleeping. They were wrong. Dead wrong. While Admiral Rodriguez fortified the Sol system, her actions did not go unnoticed. Light years away, deep within the Concordat's grand chamber, whispers of humanity's unexpected resilience reached the ears of those who understood the true implications of the Mirath defeat. Zelthor's crystalline form caught the light as he strode into the Grand Council chamber of the Concordat station. The vast dome-shaped room hummed with quiet energy as council members settled into their seats, their crystalline bodies creating a dazzling display of refracted light. His companion, Sci-Fi, followed close behind, carrying stacks of data crystals, her movements quick and eager despite the formal setting. Honorable Council, Zelthor began, his voice steady despite his nerves, the slight flicker in his crystalline surface betraying his anxiety. I bring urgent news regarding the humans of Earth. Elder Psykeen leaned forward, her translucent features showing mild interest, centuries of political maneuvering evident in her carefully neutral expression. Proceed, Scholar Zelthor. The holographic display sparked to life, showing footage of the Mirath attack. The three-dimensional images filled the chamber with ghostly blue light. This recording shows human defenders repelling Mirath forces with unexpected skill. Their technological advancement far exceeds our previous assessments. They adapted and countered each Mirath tactic with remarkable speed. Murmurs rippled through the chamber like waves in a pond. Elder Psykeen waved a dismissive hand, her crystalline fingers catching the light. These primitives barely survived their own nuclear war. Surely you overstate their capabilities. They were fighting over scraps of food mere generations ago. Sci-Fi stepped forward, her excitement barely contained, her form practically vibrating with nervous energy. With respect, Elder, I've analyzed their defensive systems. The humans have developed kinetic weapons that bypass our most advanced shielding technology. Look here. She highlighted the footage of railguns tearing through Mirath shields, the devastating effectiveness clear for all to see. Impossible, another council member scoffed, his ancient form creaking as he shifted in his seat. Their civilization was in ruins mere centuries ago. They couldn't possibly have advanced so quickly. That's precisely why we must act, Zelthor insisted, his voice gaining strength. Their rate of advancement is unprecedented. The Mirath violation of the Treaty of Sol could trigger a response we're not prepared for. We've never seen any species adapt this rapidly. These are mere defensive measures, Elder Psykeen said, her tone dripping with condescension. You suggest we upend centuries of policy based on one skirmish? We are the Concordat. We do not rush to hasty decisions. A younger council member raised her voice, her crystalline form still sharp and clear compared to the weathered surfaces of the elders. Perhaps we should investigate further, if humans have indeed advanced this quickly. Enough, Elder Psykeen cut her off, her voice echoing through the chamber. "The Council has more pressing matters than a minor border dispute with primitives. This session is concluded." Zelthor's crystalline surface flickered with frustration as he gathered his data crystals, nodding to Sirathai. As they left the chamber, she touched his arm, her touch conveying shared worry. "They're wrong, you know. We need to see for ourselves. The humans aren't what they think." "Agreed," Zelthor said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "We must reach Earth's system before it's too late, before we miss our chance to understand them." Even as Zelthor's warnings fell on deaf ears within the Concordat, the Miroth were already planning their next move. On the bridge of his warship, Raxor seethed with frustration, unwilling to accept defeat. If brute force had failed, then perhaps something more insidious was required. Raxor paced the command deck of his battlecruiser, his scaled tail twitching with barely contained rage. The memory of their first defeat burned in his mind like acid. His claws dug into his palms as he replayed the humiliation over and over. "Deploy the bio-enhanced units," he growled to his subordinates. "Show these mammals what real warriors can do." His voice carried such venom that several junior officers flinched away from their stations. Below, specialized Miroth troops in glistening organic armor poured from their landing craft. Their biosuits pulsed with living tissue, designed to thrive in the harshest environments. The sight was both beautiful and terrifying. Hundreds of warriors covered in armor that breathed and moved like a second skin. Inside the asteroid outpost, Captain Novak watched the invasion force through reinforced viewports. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the climate controls. "They're back," he muttered into his comm. "And they brought friends." His fingers drummed nervously on the control panel. "Sir," his communications officer called out. "Mars Command is scrambling reinforcements, but they're hours away even at maximum speed." The young officer's voice cracked slightly with tension. Novak nodded grimly. "Then we make do. Execute Protocol Delta." His calm tone betrayed none of the fear churning in his gut. His crew worked quickly, setting up fake transmitter beacons throughout the outpost's maze-like corridors. As the Miroth forces breached the outer defenses, automated messages began broadcasting from multiple locations. The trap was carefully laid, each false signal perfectly calibrated to seem real. "The humans split up," one of Raxor's officers reported, mandibles clicking with excitement. "Multiple squad signatures detected." Raxor bared his teeth in a predatory grin. "Divide and conquer. Send teams to each location." His confidence grew with each passing moment. But as his troops spread out, following the phantom signals, Novak's real forces waited in carefully prepared positions. One by one, Mr. Roth's squads walked into crossfire zones, caught between automated turrets and determined defenders. The sound of weapons fire echoed through the station's halls. "Engineering reports ready, sir," Novak's second-in-command announced, trying to hide a smile. "The EMP device is charged." "Now," Novak ordered. A massive electromagnetic pulse ripped through the station's corridors. The organic components of the Miroth biosuit seized up, their protective functions failing. Radiation from the nearby sun poured through the compromised armor. The warriors screamed as their living armor betrayed them. Raxor watched in horror as his troops' life signs began failing. "Impossible," he snarled. "How are they surviving the radiation?" His tail whipped back and forth in agitation, knocking over a nearby data terminal. Through the command feed, he saw human defenders moving freely, protected by much simpler but effective radiation suits. Their bodies, hardened by generations of space living, handled the exposure far better than his own warriors. The humans moved with practiced ease through the lethal environment. "Pull back!" Raxor roared as more of his soldiers fell. "Full retreat!" His voice cracked with rage and disbelief. The surviving Miroth troops scrambled back to their ships, leaving their dead and wounded behind. In the aftermath, Novak stood in a corridor lined with fallen enemies, his expression grim but determined. The victory felt hollow among so much death, but they had done what they had to do to survive. The battle at the asteroid outpost had been costly for both sides, but war does not pause for reflection. As Mars Command assessed the latest incursion, a deeper realization took hold. This was no longer a border skirmish. It was the beginning of something much larger. Admiral Rodriguez stood at the head of the circular war room table, her hands pressed flat against its polished surface. The red dust of Mars swirled outside the reinforced windows like an angry sandstorm, but her focus remained locked on the holographic display showing the solar system's defensive grid. Blue dots marked human installations, while red warning markers highlighted suspected enemy positions. "Captain Novak, please repeat your assessment for everyone," she said, nodding to his flickering blue hologram. Dark circles under his eyes showed the strain of recent battles. Novak's tired face hovered above the table. "The Murroth aren't just after our outpost. Their attack patterns suggest they're probing our defenses across multiple sectors. They want our resources, all of them, Mercury's mines, Jupiter's gas fields, everything we've built over the last century." The assembled officers shifted uneasily in their seats. Some gripped their tablets too tightly, while others couldn't stop fidgeting with their uniform buttons. Rodriguez watched their reactions carefully, noting the mix of concern and determination on their faces. She'd handpicked each one for their cool heads under pressure. "Dr. Zhang?" she called out to a woman in a lab coat who'd been practically bouncing in her seat. "You have something to share?" The scientist cleared her throat. "Yes, Admiral." "It's time we revealed Project Starbridge." She waved her hand, bringing up new schematics that rotated slowly in the air. "We've successfully reverse-engineered alien FTL technology. Our prototypes work. We've already done secret test jumps to Neptune and back." Gasps filled the room. Papers rustled as people leaned forward for a better look. An older general with steel-gray hair leaned forward. "But the Concordat thinks we're years away from our first FTL flight." "That was intentional," Rodriguez said firmly. "We needed time to develop our capabilities without interference. Sometimes the best defense is letting others underestimate you." Captain Novak's hologram flickered as static crackled through the connection. "Admiral, what are your orders?" "We're holding for now, but my ships can't keep this up forever." "That's what we need to decide," Rodriguez cut in. She began pacing, her boots clicking against the floor like a metronome. "We could strike first, hit their staging areas before they fully mobilize, or we maintain defensive positions, show the galaxy we're not the aggressors they paint us to be." "The Murroth attacked us first," a young commander pointed out, slapping his hand on the table. "We have the right to defend ourselves. 3 colonies lost already." Rodriguez shook her head. "It's not that simple. If we strike first, we risk losing support from neutral species in the Concordat. But if we wait too long..." She let the words hang in the air like a sword. The room erupted in heated debate. Officers argued tactics and politics while pointing at different sectors of the map. Rodriguez let it continue for exactly 1 minute before raising her hand for silence. The room went quiet instantly. "Here's what we're going to do," she announced, her voice carrying the weight of command. "First, we strengthen our border colonies. Every outpost gets reinforced. Second, we implement Case Orange, full military mobilization but in defensive positions only. Let them make the first big move." She turned to face the massive window, Mars's red landscape stretching to the horizon under swirling dust clouds. "And third, we prepare our fallback options. Dr. Zhang, how quickly can we deploy those prototype ships?" "We have 3 ready now, 5 more within the week. They're our fastest builds ever." Rodriguez nodded sharply. "Do it quietly. I want them positioned at strategic points throughout the system. If the Murroth want to fight, we'll show them humanity's got teeth they never knew about." The meeting concluded with rapid-fire orders. Ships vanished through hidden slipstream gates, their missions classified at the highest levels. The solar system's defensive grid hummed to life, a web of human ingenuity and determination. Behind the scenes, humanity's secret weapons moved into position, ready to turn the tables on anyone who thought Earth's children were easy prey. While humanity prepared for war, Others sought answers. Zelthor and Sci-Fi, armed with knowledge the Council refused to acknowledge, embarked on a dangerous journey toward the Sol system. If the humans truly were as advanced as they feared, they needed to see it firsthand. Through the viewport of their small research vessel, Zelthor watched the stars blur past. His crystalline form caught the light from distant Sol, sending tiny rainbows dancing across the ship's interior. The light show reminded him of home, of the great crystal spires where he'd spent decades studying humanity from afar. Beside him, Sci-Fi worked the controls with practiced ease, her own crystalline form glowing softly in concentration. "Another Midaroth patrol," she whispered, her fingers flying across the console, adjusting course to avoid detection. Their ship slipped between two asteroids, using the natural debris field as cover. The rock spun lazily around them, offering welcome shelter from prying eyes. As they moved deeper into the solar system, both aliens felt their amazement grow. Hidden among the rocks were human installations, listening posts, sensor arrays, and what looked like weapons platforms, all carefully disguised to blend with the natural formations. The ingenuity of the camouflage was striking. "Look at this," Zelthor said, pointing to their scanner display. "The humans have established a widespread presence throughout their entire system. And these energy readings near Jupiter?" Sci-Fi's eyes widened. "Those must be their fleet movements. The sophistication of their ship's energy signatures is truly remarkable. To think, just a few generations ago, their world was devastated by nuclear war. Yet now, they've risen to become a formidable power. Their recovery speed is unlike anything we've seen before." A warning light flashed on their console, bathing the cockpit in red. Sci-Fi's crystalline form tensed. "Human patrol, bearing 3.7. They've picked up our drive signature." Her hands danced across the controls, moving with urgent purpose. "Adjusting our hull's resonance frequency, adding a layer of cosmic radiation scatter." She bit her lip in concentration, her crystalline features tight with worry. "There. To their sensors, we should look like just another chunk of space rock." They held their breath as the patrol of sleek human ships, their designs unlike anything in known space, glided past their hiding spot. The vessels moved with an almost predatory grace. "We can't keep sneaking around," Zelthor said once the patrol was gone, wiping nervous sweat from his brow. "The Council needs to understand what we're seeing here. The humans aren't some primitive species anymore. They're a force to be reckoned with." Sci-Fi nodded, bringing up a holographic map of Mars, its red surface crisscrossed with settlement markers. "Then we go straight to their leadership. Admiral Rodriguez commands from Olympus Base." She plotted a course, careful to avoid the major shipping lanes that buzzed with human activity. "It's risky, but necessary," Zelthor finished, his voice firm with conviction. "Set course for Mars. We must inform the Council of Humanity's remarkable progress and the potential threat they pose, or the opportunity they represent. The fate of peaceful contact may depend on it." As Zelthor and Sci-Fi navigated the depths of human space, the Midaroth prepared for their next move. Raxor's forces regrouped at the system's edge, their numbers bolstered and their strategy refined. This time, they would not be so easily repelled. Raxor's massive battlecruiser tore through space, its bioorganic hull gleaming under the distant sunlight like wet scales. The ship dropped out of FTL with a brilliant flash, followed by his attack squadron of 12 vessels, each bristling with living weapons. Through the command viewport, the red surface of Mars stretched below, dotted with human colonies that looked as fragile as insect nests to his eyes. "Pathetic," Raxor growled, his scaled hands gripping the control panel hard enough to leave marks. "Open a channel to their command. Let's see how quickly these mammals break." Admiral Rodriguez stood tall in Mars Command Center, her uniform crisp despite the late hour and the growing tension in the room. Captain Novak, fresh from the Kuiper Belt and still bearing the dark circles of recent combat, stood at her side as Raxor's transmission came through on the main screen. "Listen well, Earth mammals." Raxor's voice boomed through the speakers, his reptilian features filling the display. "Your primitive defenses cannot withstand the might of the Murroth Federation. Surrender now, and we may show mercy to your young ones." Rodriguez's lips curved into a slight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "This is Admiral Jana Rodriguez, of the United Earth Defense Fleet. Perhaps you'd like to reconsider your position." She nodded to an officer who activated a holographic display with practiced efficiency. Hundreds of weapon platforms emerged from their stealth fields around Mars, their railgun batteries tracking the Murroth ships with deadly purpose. The platforms had been waiting there for months, hidden by technology the aliens had dismissed as impossible for primitive humans. Raxor's eyes widened slightly at the sight, his scaled ridge lifting in surprise. "You dare threaten?" Raxor began, but Rodriguez cut him off with calm authority. "We don't threaten, Commander. We defend." Her voice remained steady as steel. "Captain Novak here has already demonstrated what happens to those who underestimate humanity. Ask your patrols in the belt, the ones that made it back." Raxor's face twisted with rage, his scales flushing dark with anger. He barked orders in his native tongue, a series of harsh clicks and growls, and 3 Murroth cruisers surged forward, their weapons charging with an ominous green glow. "Defense grid active," an officer reported from her station. "EMP bursts ready on your command, Admiral." The Murroth ships opened fire, their energy weapons lighting up space like artificial suns. But the human defense platforms were already moving, their railguns answering with devastating volleys of tungsten rounds. Electromagnetic pulses rippled through space like invisible waves, disrupting the Murroth ships' bioorganic systems and making them twitch like wounded animals. "Their shields are failing," Novak observed, watching the tactical display with grim satisfaction. "Just like in the belt. They never expect us to use such primitive weapons. Kinetic rounds and electromagnetic pulses. Gets them every time." 2 Murroth cruisers listed badly, their hulls punctured by railgun fire that left gaping wounds in their living metal. The third tried to withdraw but took heavy damage to its engines, trailing bits of bioorganic matter like cosmic blood. Raxor watched in disbelief as his squadron fell apart around him. "This isn't possible," he snarled, pounding his control panel as he ordered his remaining ships to fall back. "Fall back! Regroup at Point Delta. The Council must know of this." The Murroth battlecruiser turned away, collecting its damaged companions before jumping to FTL in a flash of distorted space. In the command center, Rodriguez turned to Novak, her expression serious. "Tell me everything about those belt encounters," she said, already planning ahead. "Every detail matters now. We need to be ready when they come back with reinforcements." The Murroth fleet withdrew, but the threat lingered like a storm on the horizon. As Mars Command tracked their movements, an unexpected transmission arrived, one that could shift the course of the conflict entirely. The sleek Vakir vessel glided silently toward Mars Station Alpha, its crystalline hull reflecting the rust-red planet below, like a mirror catching sunlight. Inside, Zelthor's hands trembled slightly as he activated the communication array, his crystalline fingers tapping nervously against the controls. "Mars Station Alpha, this is Zelthor of the Vakir. We come in peace and request emergency diplomatic contact. Our mission is urgent." The response was immediate and cold. "Unidentified vessel, hold position at coordinates 227 Mark IV. Any sudden moves will be met with lethal force. This is your only warning." Sirathai touched Zelthor's shoulder, her eyes bright with excitement despite the tension. "Look at their defense grid. Such elegant simplicity in those railgun platforms. The targeting systems are unlike anything in our database." Armed shuttles surrounded their ship from all angles, harsh spotlights piercing the darkness of space. A gruff voice crackled through the comm. "Prepare for boarding. Power down all systems except life support." When the airlock hissed open with a burst of equalizing pressure, 6 armored humans entered with weapons raised. Their black armor gleamed under the ship's lights. Zelthor raised his crystalline hands slowly, trying to appear as non-threatening as possible. We have crucial information about the Mineroth attacks. The Concordat Council refused to act. We came directly to warn you. Time is running out. Sci-Fi stepped forward, holding out a data crystal that sparkled with stored information. This proves the Mineroth violated the Treaty of Sol. We want to help. The evidence is undeniable. The security team leader kept his weapon steady but spoke into his calm, voice tight with urgency. Admiral Rodriguez, you'll want to see this. The aliens have proof of treaty violations. Minutes later, Admiral Rodriguez strode onto their ship, her uniform crisp and her eyes sharp as laser sights. Her presence filled the room with authority. I'm here to determine if you're truly allies or clever spies. Choose your next words carefully. Neither, Zelthor said softly, meeting her gaze. We're scientists who believe in doing what's right, even when our own government won't. Sci-Fi noticed a human technician struggling with a sparking power conduit near the docking port, muttering curses under his breath. May I? She asked Rodriguez, gesturing to the damage. When the Admiral nodded cautiously, Sci-Fi approached the panel. She released a small cloud of maintenance nanites from a pouch at her belt. The tiny machines swarmed over the damaged circuitry like a silver mist, repairing it in seconds. The technician's eyes widened in amazement. That's incredible. Would have taken me an hour to fix that. Rodriguez watched the interaction carefully, her expression thoughtful but still guarded. You'll be escorted to our secure diplomatic section. One wrong move, one hint of deception. We understand, Zelthor said quickly. We only wish to prevent more bloodshed. Too many lives are at stake. Under heavy guard, they began their walk through the station's corridors toward Mars's surface. Sci-Fi studied the efficient human architecture with obvious admiration, noting how they maximized every inch of space, while Zelthor kept his focus on Admiral Rodriguez, hoping they had made the right choice in coming here. The fate of two species might depend on it. While the debate raged within Mars Command, a far more volatile discussion was unfolding within the Concordat. The Mineroth had gambled on swift victory, but now they found themselves on trial before the entire galactic community. In the stark briefing chamber deep within Mars Station Alpha, Zelthor stood before a semicircle of attentive human officers. His crystalline form caught the harsh lighting as he gestured to the holographic display, casting rainbow-like reflections across the metal walls. Your species survived what should have been extinction, he said, his translator making his voice sound warm and earnest. The nuclear winter of 2047 would have ended most civilizations. But humans, you rebuilt in decades what should have taken centuries. Your cities rose from ashes, your people united instead of falling apart. Admiral Rodriguez leaned forward, her weathered face showing keen interest, fingers drumming on the steel table. And this rapid recovery concerns the Concordat? It terrifies them, Sci-Fi interjected, stepping forward to adjust the display with quick, nervous movements. Look at these engineering schematics we intercepted from the Mineroth. Their shield technology is considered advanced, yet your simple railguns cut through them like paper. The test footage made half the council jump out of their seats. The human officers exchanged knowing looks, some barely hiding smirks. Rodriguez's eyes narrowed. You've noticed our FTL capabilities, haven't you? Zelthor nodded slowly, his crystalline structure dimming slightly. The energy signatures are distinctive. The Council believes you're years away from your first test flight. They're wrong, aren't they? The question, a gruff general spoke up, his scarred face reflecting years of frontier battles, is whether we should keep that advantage hidden. The element of surprise could be crucial if the Mineroth push us into full-scale war. Sci-Fi's crystalline features flickered with concern, her form shifting colors from blue to a worried amber. A war would be devastating for both sides. The Mineroth are proud, but they're also numerous. They've conquered 12 star systems. Their fleets darken the skies of their conquered worlds. And yet they couldn't take a single asteroid outpost, Rodriguez countered, standing to pace the room, her boots clicking against the floor. But you're right about the cost. Even if we win, the losses would be substantial. Earth's colonies are still too fragile. We could strike first, another officer suggested, jabbing a finger at the hologram. Hit their staging areas before they mass their forces. Take out their supply lines. Rodriguez stopped pacing, her face troubled, years of command weighing heavily in her expression. And become the aggressors? Prove the Council right about humanity being dangerous? We didn't survive nuclear war just to become the monsters they think we are. The Council must be made to understand, Zelthor pleaded, his form brightening with intensity. Your species isn't just surviving anymore, you're thriving. But the Miroth see your resources, your technology, and their pride won't let them back down without intervention. They've never faced a species that could match them. A tense silence filled the room. Rodriguez studied the star charts, showing Miroth fleet movements at the edge of the solar system, their ships like hungry wolves circling a campfire. A preemptive strike might save lives in the short term, she said slowly, weighing each word. But it would close the door on peaceful coexistence for generations. We'd be starting the very war we're trying to prevent. Admiral, Zelthor said, moving closer, his crystalline form humming with barely contained energy. Let me open a direct channel to the Council. Show them the truth about humanity's progress. Force them to acknowledge the reality of what's happening here. Make them see you as we do. Rodriguez looked around the room at her officers, then back to the two alien visitors. After a long moment, she straightened her uniform with practiced precision. I'll consider it. If the Council can actually stop this war before it begins, but we'll need a backup plan, we always do. Despite the Council's deliberations, war was not decided by votes alone. In the darkness beyond the Sol system, the Miroth High Command had already made their choice. Their fleet burned through space, hungry for retribution. In the Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Concordat, Elder Psychene's iridescent scales shimmered with agitation as she addressed the assembled representatives. Her claws gripped the speaking podium tightly, betraying her tension. We cannot ignore this breach any longer, she said, her tail twitching back and forth like an angry whip. The Miroth Federation has violated not one, but 7 specific clauses of the Treaty of Sol. Their actions threaten the peace we've maintained for generations. The chamber erupted in overlapping voices. Some council members rose from their seats, while others retreated into defensive postures. The ancient marble-like walls seemed to amplify every worried whisper and angry shout. Ambassador Krith, the Miroth representative, let out a dismissive snort that echoed through the chamber. His massive frame towered over the other delegates as he spoke. We are simply protecting our legitimate mining interests in an underdeveloped system. These humans are barely more than savages with crude weapons. They should be grateful for our attention. Crude weapons that have twice repelled your forces, countered Representative Zix of the Harmonious Collective, their tentacles writhing in agitation. Or have you forgotten the humiliation at Jupiter's moons? Psychene pulled up holographic footage from the recent skirmishes, filling the chamber with ghostly blue light. Look at their defensive capabilities. Their adaptation rate is unprecedented. And now our most knowledgeable expert on human development, Zelthor, has vanished after warning us repeatedly about underestimating them. His disappearance cannot be a coincidence. The Miroth Federation will not be lectured about treaty violations by lesser powers, Krith growled, baring sharp teeth that gleamed in the holographic light. His claws left scratch marks on his console. The chamber descended into chaos again. Smaller species representatives huddled together, whispering anxiously. The unified cloud's delegate pulsed rapidly between colors of fear and anger, their gaseous form swirling in distress. If the Miroth can ignore our treaties without consequence, called out the unified cloud's representative, their voice like wind through chimes, what stops them from claiming our territories next? Who will be their next target? Psychene seized the moment, her voice cutting through the disorder. I propose an immediate diplomatic mission to the Sol system. We must understand the situation firsthand before this escalates beyond control. The humans deserve to be heard. The voting crystals materialized before each council member, casting rainbow patterns across the chamber. Psyche held her breath as they began to glow one by one, each light representing a voice in the galaxy's future. The final tally appeared in the chamber's center, 51% in favor. "Motion carried," announced the chief arbiter, their metallic voice resonating through the chamber. "A diplomatic envoy will be dispatched to Sol immediately." Psyche relaxed slightly, but the Murath ambassador's dark chuckle as he left the chamber sent a chill through her scales. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were already too late. The battle near Jupiter had bloodied both sides, but no one dared call it a victory. As the Murath retreated to lick their wounds, Mars Command braced for the inevitable retaliation, one that could decide the fate of the entire system. The massive Mizrath warship Claw of Dominance dropped out of FTL, leading a fleet of 30 vessels toward the solar system. Inside the command center, decorated in bioluminescent panels and curved metal that pulsed with an organic glow, Fleet Commander Vextel's scaled fingers drummed against his command chair. His tail twitched with barely contained rage. "Raxor's failures are disappointing," he growled. "These humans should have been crushed already. They're nothing but soft-skinned prey, hiding behind their rocks." On the bridge of the UEF Dauntless, Admiral Rodriguez studied the holographic display showing the incoming Murath fleet. Her eyes narrowed at the readings from their new shield configurations. Coffee grew cold in her forgotten mug as she analyzed every detail. "They've adapted," she said to her staff, "but so have we." A small smile played at her lips as she pressed a button on her command console. "Execute Operation Lightning Strike." Hidden in the dark spaces between Jupiter's moons, 20 human warships powered up their FTL drives. The sleek vessels, their hulls marked with Earth Defense Fleet insignias, had waited silently for days. They vanished into slipspace with barely a ripple in spacetime. Raxor, aboard his own vessel, watched in horror as human ships materialized in the middle of the Murath formation. Ships he'd sworn couldn't exist appeared from nowhere, weapons already hot. "Impossible!" he roared, slamming his fist on his command console. "They can't have FTL capability. We were assured they were contained in this system." The space around Saturn's rings erupted in weapons fire. Captain Novak led his strike team through the crystalline corridors of the Murath forward base. They moved like shadows, their stealth suits adapting to match the bioorganic walls as they planted charges on vital communication arrays. "Team 2 status?" Novak whispered into his comm, his breath fogging his helmet visor. "Charges set, Captain." "Their quantum relays won't survive this. Turns out these lizards should have invested in better security." The explosions ripped through the base, leaving the Murath fleet cut off from their command structure. Emergency lights bathed the scattered wreckage in an eerie red glow while alarms wailed uselessly into the vacuum of space. Back on his ship, Raxor stared at the damage reports flooding his screens. The humans had not only developed FTL technology, but had kept it hidden. They'd struck with perfect timing, targeting exactly what would hurt the Mizrath most. His entire worldview crumbled with each new alert. His clawed hand crushed the datapad he was holding, metal and crystal cracking under his grip. These weren't primitive mammals stumbling into space. This was a sophisticated species that had deliberately hidden their true capabilities, waiting for the right moment to reveal their strength. And he, Raxor the Conqueror, had fallen right into their trap. As the humans and their allies scrambled to prepare for the next assault, the Murath fleet loomed at the system's edge, their warships bristling with barely restrained fury. The final test of Earth's survival was about to begin. In the Mars Command Center's observation deck, Zelthor's crystalline form caught the red sunlight as he watched tactical displays showing the approaching Murath fleet. "Admiral, please," he said, turning to Rodriguez. "Elder Psyche will act. She must. We need just a little more time for diplomacy." Rodriguez shook her head, her weathered features tight with concern. We're out of time, Zelthor. I won't leave Earth defenseless while we wait for the Council to find their backbone. Captain Novak strode into the room, still dusty from his Saturn mission. The raid worked better than expected, Admiral. We caught them completely off guard. Their new biotech isn't as impressive up close. Show me, Rodriguez said. Novak pulled up helmet footage on the main screen. It showed human commandos using modified EMP charges to disable Midaroth communication arrays. Their arrogance makes them sloppy. They still think we're primitive. Sci-Fi watched the footage with growing unease. Her metallic voice wavered. Your weapons, your tactics, they're far beyond what anyone suspected. Yet you hold back. Why? Because war should always be the last resort, Rodriguez answered. She pressed a button, revealing a holographic map of the solar system. Red dots lit up throughout the asteroid belt, hidden weapons platforms and drone bases. But we're ready if they force our hand. She turned to her staff. Initialize Fortress Protocol, deploy the kinetic platforms, launch the automated squadrons. The room burst into activity as orders were relayed. Sci-Fi's crystalline hands trembled as she worked at a console, helping to analyze Miroth's shield frequencies. I never imagined the scope of your preparations. The Council was so wrong about your people. We learned the hard way, Novak said quietly. After the nuclear war, we swore we'd never be caught unprepared again. Rodriguez studied the tactical display. The Miroth fleet will be in range in 6 hours. I'm moving our forces to intercept. She looked at Zelthor. Make your transmission. Try to reach anyone who'll listen. But I won't risk Earth's safety on the Council's conscience. Zelthor nodded gravely. Sci-Fi, help me prepare the broadcast. We must try, even if it's our last chance. Around them, the massive machinery of human defense whirred to life. Asteroid bases revealed hidden weapon ports. Drone carriers launched swarms of fighters. The fleet moved with practiced precision, each ship knowing its role in the coming battle. With Mars standing defiant and the Miroth suffering another costly setback, the true cost of war was beginning to weigh on both sides. Yet while some called for diplomacy, others still thirsted for vengeance. The void near Jupiter erupted with light as the Miroth armada dropped out of FTL. Admiral Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the EDF flagship Olympus, her jaw set as she watched hundreds of enemy vessels materialize. All ships, battle stations, she ordered. Remember your training. These aren't the unstoppable gods they think they are. Raxor's voice boomed across all frequencies. Surrender now, humans. Your primitive weapons cannot penetrate our improved shields. Rodriguez allowed herself a small smile. Fire at will. The space between the fleets lit up as railgun platforms unleashed torrents of hypervelocity rounds. The Miroth shields flickered and failed as carefully aimed shots found weak points in their defense grid. Entire sections of their largest carriers crumpled under the kinetic impacts. Impossible! Raxor roared as his flagship shuddered. Launch the biotorpedoes. Show these mammals our true might. Swarms of living weapons surged toward the human fleet. Emergency klaxons blared as the organic projectiles breached hull plating on multiple ships. Crew members were sucked into space as compartments decompressed. On Mars, Zelthor and Sci-Fi watched in horror through long-range sensors. Such devastation, Sci-Fi whispered. Why won't they listen to reason? Because pride blinds them, Zelthor replied grimly. The Miroth cannot accept that humans have surpassed their expectations. Rodriguez gripped her command chair as another volley rocked the Olympus. Casualty reports flooded in from across the fleet. She stared at the tactical display showing the massive rail accelerator hidden on a captured dwarf planet, their ultimate weapon, capable of launching projectiles at near light speed. Admiral, her weapons officer said, the accelerator is charged and ready. Rodriguez closed her eyes briefly. Using it would likely kill thousands of Miroth warriors. But if she didn't, how many humans would die? All ships fall back to Mars, she ordered instead. We've bloodied their nose. Let's regroup and repair while we can. The Earth fleet disengaged in perfect formation, covering each other's retreat with precise defensive fire. They'd won this round, but at a terrible cost. As they limped toward Mars, the red planet's defense grid powered up, ready to protect them if the Muroth pursued. As Raxor struggled with the realities of war, the Concordat finally decided to intervene. A diplomatic envoy set course for Mars, hoping to bring reason to a conflict spiraling toward catastrophe. Raxor slumped in his command chair, surrounded by flickering displays showing the devastating toll of the battle. Smoke still curled from damaged consoles, and the groans of wounded warriors echoed through the corridors of his flagship. "High Command," he growled into the comm. "We've lost 30% of our fleet. Their weapons—" He paused, his scales bristling. "They pierce our shields like they're not even there." The response was immediate and harsh. "Unacceptable. These mammals must be taught their place." Another voice cut in, older and steadier. "Perhaps we should consider withdrawal. The cost dash." "Cowardice," a third commander bellowed. "Raxor, you will initiate planetary bombardment immediately." Raxor's claws dug into his armrests. The humans had fought with cunning and courage, qualities he'd been taught only the Muroth possessed. Every engagement proved them more formidable than the last. Meanwhile on Mars, Zelthor rushed into Admiral Rodriguez's command center. "Please, you must let me try to reach them. More bloodshed serves neither side." Rodriguez studied the tactical display where the damaged Muroth fleet hung in space like wounded predators. "They've made their position clear. They see diplomacy as weakness." "Then let me show them their error," Zelthor insisted. "The Muroth respect strength. You've proven yours. Now show them wisdom." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "Open a channel." But when Zelthor's message reached the Muroth fleet, the response was predictable. "We do not negotiate with primitive species," a commander spat. Raxor watched the exchange silently. The bodies of his warriors filled the medical bays. More ships would mean more deaths, and for what? Pride? Glory? He found himself wondering if there might be another way. "Hold position," he ordered his fleet, ignoring the outraged squawks from high command. "I need time to assess our tactical options." The words felt like ash in his mouth, but as he studied the sensor readings of Earth's forces, he knew they rang true. Perhaps it was time to listen. With all three powers now at the negotiation table, the fate of two civilizations hung in the balance. Words would decide what weapons could not, but trust was a rare commodity in a galaxy ruled by conflict. Elder Psykeen stood at the viewport of her diplomatic vessel, watching the glittering expanse of humanity's solar system spread before her. The ship's sensors picked up both the damaged Muroth fleet and Earth's defensive line. Two forces locked in an uneasy pause. "We're receiving transmission requests from both sides, Elder," her communications officer said. Psykeen's crystalline form caught the starlight as she turned. "Open channels to both. It's time they heard each other through a neutral party." The screens flickered to life, showing Admiral Rodriguez's stern face on one side and Raxor's scaled visage on the other. Neither looked ready to back down. "This bloodshed must end," Psykeen said firmly. "I propose immediate face-to-face negotiations on Mars, with full diplomatic protection guaranteed by the Concordat." Rodriguez's eyes narrowed. "We'll grant you safe passage, Elder, but the Muroth ships stay where they are." "Agreed," Raxor rumbled after a tense pause. "But we maintain combat readiness." As Psykeen's ship approached Mars under escort, she met with Zelthor and Sci-Fi, who had been anxiously awaiting her arrival. Their presence surprised her. She hadn't expected to find fellow Concordat members already on site. "The humans have capabilities far beyond our assessments," Sci-Fi whispered urgently, "and weapons we've never seen. If these talks fail—" "Then we must not fail," Psykeen replied, though doubt gnawed at her. The Concordat Council would not look kindly on her legitimizing Earth as an equal power, but the alternative was worse. The Martian Diplomatic Center was a marvel of human engineering, carved into the red planet's surface. As delegates from all three powers gathered in the antechamber, the tension was thick enough to cut with a blade. Rodriguez stood with her officers, ramrod straight, while Raxor's delegation kept their claws close to ceremonial weapons. Sci-Fi noticed how the humans had positioned hidden security measures throughout. They weren't taking any chances. "Welcome to Mars," Rodriguez announced, her voice carrying across the chamber. "Let's see if we can end this without further destruction." The weight of the moment pressed down on all present. Outside, the combined might of three spacefaring civilizations waited on hair triggers, while inside, their leaders prepared to either forge peace or signal apocalypse. As the diplomats argued over terms, the weight of history pressed upon them all. Could the cycle of war truly be broken, or was this merely the calm before an even greater storm? The Grand Conference Chamber on Mars Colony buzzed with tension. Guards from 3 different species lined the walls, weapons carefully holstered but ready. At the circular table sat the fate of 2 civilizations: Admiral Rodriguez, straight-backed and composed; Raxor, his scaled hide still bearing scorch marks from battle; and Elder Sci-Fi, her crystalline form catching the light. Rodriguez stood activating a holographic display. "Before we begin negotiations, let me be clear about humanity's position." The air filled with technical readouts, sleek ships with FTL drives, advanced weapon systems, and defensive grids spanning the solar system. "Impossible," Raxor growled, tail lashing. "Your kind were burning your own world mere centuries ago. This technology dash is very real," Rodriguez cut in. "We adapted, we survived, we learned." Raxor's claws scraped the table. "You violated the natural order. The Marath earned our place through millennia of conquest. You're barely out of your caves." The chamber erupted in shouts. Guards tensed. Zelthor stepped forward, his voice cutting through the chaos. "This is precisely why we must talk. Look at the data." He gestured to Sci-Fi, who projected casualty figures from the recent battles. "Both sides have demonstrated devastating capability," Sci-Fi added. "The next engagement could destroy whole worlds." "The Murath do not retreat," Raxor snarled, but his voice held less conviction. A human medic stepped forward, her uniform still stained from treating wounded. "We saved 3 of your soldiers after the Jupiter battle. Their biosuits had failed. They would have died." Raxor blinked, surprised. "You aided them?" "Just as your rear guard waited for our escape pods during the Saturn engagement," Rodriguez replied quietly. "We all know the cost of war. We've all seen enough death." The chamber fell silent. Raxor's posture shifted, the rage in his eyes dimming to something closer to respect. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "we could discuss terms." The ink was barely dry on the new accords when disaster nearly struck. The missile attack had been thwarted, but the message was clear: peace would not come without sacrifice. The Mars Conference Chamber's lights dimmed as night fell, but no one moved to leave. Admiral Rodriguez rubbed her tired eyes, watching the holographic displays of territorial boundaries float above the table. "The United Earth Defense Fleet has proven itself," she said firmly. "We won't accept second-class status in the Concordat any longer." Raxor's tail twitched with irritation. "The Murath Federation has legitimate mining claims." "Which you tried to take by force," Rodriguez cut in. "That ended badly for everyone." Elder Sci-Fi raised a crystalline hand. "Perhaps we can find middle ground. The Council would support Earth's membership, with full voting rights, if we establish fair resource-sharing protocols." Zelthor stepped forward from his observer position. "Look at what we've already accomplished through cooperation." He gestured to where Sci-Fi worked with human engineers, their combined expertise already improving the colony's life support systems. "Violence benefits no one." Raxor's scales darkened, a sign of internal conflict. The recent battles had decimated his fleet, yet surrendering mining rights felt like betrayal of Mirath supremacy. Before he could respond, alarms blared. A tactical display flashed red. "Missile launch detected," a human officer shouted. "Origin, Miseroth support vessel." Rodriguez's fingers flew across her console, activating defense systems. "Point defense grid online." The chamber watched in horror as automated railguns tracked the incoming missile. With precise shots, they shattered it into harmless debris that burned up in the Martian atmosphere. "I did not authorize this," Raxor roared, spinning toward his communications officer. "Who dared?" "Ultra-nationalist faction," the officer reported grimly. "They've barricaded themselves in the lower decks of the Bloodfang." Raxor's massive fist slammed the table. "This dishonors us all. I formally denounce these traitors and their actions." He turned to Rodriguez. "Admiral, I request permission to personally lead the arrest of these criminals." The chamber fell silent, watching Rodriguez consider this crucial moment. The fate of peace hung by a thread. The Mars conference chamber buzzed with nervous energy as delegates filed in for what everyone knew would be the decisive session. Admiral Rodriguez stood at the head of the table, her uniform crisp, despite the sleepless night. "Before we begin," she said, her voice carrying across the room, "I want to address yesterday's incident. It showed us exactly why these talks must succeed." Raxor's scales shifted uncomfortably. "The perpetrators have been identified and contained," he growled. "They acted without authority. Then let's ensure their actions don't derail what we've come here to accomplish." Rodriguez activated a holographic display. "This is our final proposal." The terms appeared in multiple languages: full concordant membership for humanity, complete withdrawal of Miseroth forces, and compensation for treaty violations. But there was something new. An offer of technological exchange programs. "You would share your advances?" Raxor's head tilted in surprise. "Within reason," Rodriguez replied. "We've seen enough destruction. This way, both our peoples move forward with dignity." Elder Psyche leaned forward, her crystalline form catching the light. "This is unprecedented, but these are unprecedented times." Selthor watched intently as Raxor studied the terms. The Miseroth commander's claws tapped against the table, a steady rhythm that matched the tension in the room. "I have fought your people," Raxor said finally, looking at Rodriguez. "You could have destroyed us completely after the missile attack. Instead, you offer partnership." He straightened to his full height. "The Miseroth Federation accepts these terms." Sirathai's excitement was barely contained. "The scientific possibilities alone will be carefully monitored." Rodriguez cut in with a small smile. "Trust builds slowly." Elder Psyche rose, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. "Then let it be recorded. Earth and her colonies are hereby recognized as full members of the Galactic Concordat, with all rights and responsibilities thereof." The ceremony that followed was broadcast across known space. Signatures were exchanged, treaties were sealed, and a new chapter of galactic history began. Admiral Rodriguez stood at the chamber's viewport afterward, watching Earth's orbital ring glinting in the distance, a symbol of both human ingenuity and their readiness for peace. If you enjoyed the story of Jonathan, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.